again, everybody. Once again, it's Sandy Boucher here. I'm your MC for the Continuity of Care Forum 7 Youth Inquest 2022. And as promised, now we're going to hear from Lisa Beck and Shawnath Kajarini from the Thunder Bay Regional Health Sciences Center. I created a new word there. Lisa Beck is the admin director for trauma and pre-hospital programs, emergency, respiratory, and critical care services at Thunder Bay Regional Health Sciences Center. Some highlights of her amazing career: 33 years healthcare experience, an IC nurse for 11 years, educator for 10 years, program director for 12 years. Her academic background is University of Southern Indiana, Master's in Nursing, Clinical Nurse Specialist, Critical Care, and her achievements are many, including Sonia's Indigenous Cultural Safety Certificate from BC Provincial Health Authority, the Dorothy Wiley Health Leaders Institute, Leading in Complex Environments. She's a member of the Métis Nation of Ontario, a member of the First Nations Indigenous Partners Working Group, and a member of the Continuity of Care Working Group. Shawnath Kajarini is one of 2 regional injury prevention leads at Thunder Bay Health Sciences Center Trauma Program. Highlights from her amazing career: 25 years of experience working as a registered nurse in the emergency department, youth injury prevention lead since 2014. She's been involved with the 7 Youth Inquest since its onset. She has a passion for working to improve the outcomes for Indigenous youth in our city and region. Her academic background is Confederation College Nursing Program or Nursing Diploma, and her achievements include the Sonia's Indigenous Cultural Safety Certificate from BC Provincial Health Authority, the Ontario Core ICF's Health from June 2017, Sonia's Indigenous Cultural Safety Certificate, BC Provincial Health Authority post-training from bystander to ally. I love the sounds of that one. So here they are to bring us up to date on the amazing things going on at Thunder Bay Regional, Lisa Beck and Shawnath Kajarini. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. Well, that was quite the introduction for both of us. Thank you, Sandy, for that introduction. As Sandy has said, my name is Shawnath. I'm speaking before Lisa. I am, been working for a long time in the emergency department and I'm currently in the position of Regional Injury Prevention Lead under the trauma program. So on behalf of the Thunder Bay Regional Trauma and Emergency Departments, I'd like to recognize that the land we are currently on is the traditional territory of the Fort William First Nation, signatory to the Robinson Superior Treaty of 1850. And it is a privilege to work and create on this land. And we give thanks for the opportunity to share in this space that we're in today. We're committed here to continuing to learn and to work very intentionally towards truth and reconciliation with the First Peoples of this land. I'd really also like to thank Amanda Manella, the inquest coordinator for NAN, for the opportunity to speak today for this Continuity of Care Forum. I think it's important too to recognize and thank Elder Lucy Kakagamic and Deputy Grand Chief Bobby Narcisse, as well as Kathy Beardy and Martha Loon, and even you, Sandy, and anybody else I have forgotten to mention here, for all the work that you put into making these events happen. So thank you as well. Today's forum is a really important opportunity to share and learn from each other. And that is so important. We need to learn effective ways to move forward and to move forward in a good way in order to support the youth, of course, and promote, as this forum is about, a careful journey ahead for the students that are attending high school here in our city. As mentioned in the lead-in, it is a co-presentation. The first half, I'm going to share sort of my, discussing some of the work under injury prevention in particular that we've been doing. That's out of the trauma end of Thunder Bay Regional. And the second half, Lisa will speak more specifically to the emergency services and emergency department and some of the work that's the good work that's being done there as well. So all of that being said, I felt right now, before I can go any further, I really felt that I really wanted to have the pictures of the 7 youth from the 7 youth inquest on our screen. And not only their pictures, I wanted to say their names today. Jethro Anderson, Reggie Bushy, Robin Harper, Kyle Morso, Paul Panachis, Curran Strang, and Jordan Labos. I just think it's really, really important that we remember their faces and we remember their names. All of these youth tragically lost their lives, and while attending high school here in our city, away from their home communities. So we really, really need to think about that and recognize that it's important to continue collaborating together on initiatives such as continuity of care and whatever other initiatives we need to in order to make things better. May this always, be on our minds and motivate us to work hard, to contribute to meaningful changes that are going to help youth be safer here in our city. So the 7 youth inquest, the very beginning of my journey for sure, way back in 2015 and 2016. And following the loss of these youth, we set out at the hospital under injury prevention in particular to make some changes. We had 6 recommendations given to us at the 7 youth inquest. So not a lot compared to maybe some other organizations, but we felt they were very, very important recommendations and something that we were determined to set out to work hard on. Like many of the other 145 recommendations, there a lot of them, when you look at them closely, they are about improving the continuity of care for students that attend high school in our cities. So hence here we are. During our initial approach to these recommendations, we were originally connected to Sunnybrook Center for Injury Prevention in Toronto, and we were kind of known in this, I'm going to say this space as party program. I think it's important to talk a little bit about that here, simply because there has been a significant change from that original way we were brought into the inquest. And so for those of you on here that may not know or be familiar with party program, it stands for Preventing Alcohol and Risk-Related Trauma in Youth. It's quite an established program. It's an international youth injury prevention program, and that is, we have a license to run party program, and so therefore I believe that is how we were brought into the inquest, with that moniker attached to the work we were doing.
Shona,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt here, but I was wondering, are you sharing your PowerPoint? Because we can't see it.
I believe I am.
Did you hit share screen?
Do you want me to go out and see?
Maybe just go to.
Does it say you're sharing? I just know you had worked hard on your slides, and I was like, I'm not sure.
That's
we can
fine.
see
That's
them.
fine. I apologize.
Now we can see it.
Okay.
So now just go from beginning again.
Yeah, my apologies.
Yep.
For those that have been listening and not seeing. Okay, and can you see it now?
Yes, yes, we're
Okay.
at the very beginning. So,
Okay, all right. Well, shall I start at the beginning then?
well, I'm thinking skip ahead to where you were, because they heard you and you made your valid points. Just skip ahead
Okay,
to the
if
slide that you're on.
Okay. But there's such good there's such good slides and I could, but that's okay. I will do that. My apologies, those of you, and thank you for being so patient. So was I about somewhere here?
Yeah.
Okay, so backtracking because of my my lack of technology. Anyway, I was saying that at the beginning, it was really, we were brought into the inquest as under the party moniker. And that was because we have a license with party program. We still have that license. However, we very quickly in discussions with Party International realized that the work we wanted to do and the work that we felt needed to be done was not something that they felt that they could support us fully in from where they were coming from. They certainly were there for us if we needed to them, and they have been there over the years to support us in a softer way. That being said, we felt it was really kind of important for us to start to make a distinction between the work so we could identify the difference and separate sort of this sort of muddy area of, is this party program or is this? So yeah, so that's good. We made that and clarified that with them, and they gave us their blessing, and we moved forward to create our own programming. So in order to do that, we developed what's called TIPS programming, and you see that here on the slide. It's its own unique logo, which I will be showing you right here now. It is an acronym, and it stands for Thunder Bay Regional Indigenous Injury Prevention Strategies, plural. And there's several different strategies we've been working on under the TIPS moniker. Today, I'm going to specifically talk about 2 of these strategies. So the first of these strategies is known as the TIPS Kit program. And the TIPS Kit program, it responds directly actually to recommendation 88.5 of the 7 Youth Inquest, which asked us to develop an injury prevention program specific for Indigenous youth. So it's good to talk about it here because this strategy does contribute to the continuity of care for youth attending high school away from home by offering really important injury prevention information prior to leaving the community. So it prepares the students before they come out. It's a portable injury prevention program that has information about risks associated with alcohol misuse, opioids, naloxone kit, and even the recovery position. TIPS Kit program, it has also 2 youth role model videos in it where the youth share their own personal stories about coming out to Thunder Bay to attend high school. So we really felt that was important and is included in one of the sessions. This format of program is good in a lot of ways, but it does give the facilitator of the program an opportunity to interact with the youth in a safe and informative way. It promotes the opportunity to build healthy relationships, and at the end of the day, it encourages youth to use their own critical thinking skills. So it's simply not just giving information, but encouraging the youth they need to use their critical thinking skills at the end of learning this information. Because it's portable, it can be easily used in northern communities, of course, but it actually could be used even in urban centers, in high schools or organizations that feel the need. Wherever injury prevention programming needs should arise. So ideally, the TIPS Kit program could be offered to youth just prior to leaving their home communities to attend high school. So it's fresh in their mind, where they're talking about some of the risky things that they might be exposed to. Hopefully this is a helpful tool, and we'll the information we planted at a really good ripe time prior to transitioning into our city. I know it was identified in the inquest that transitioning times are very, very high risk time for youth. So this is sort of how we came to the conclusion for that. Of course, the kit could be used other times, but primarily at that time would help with the continuity of care. The TIPS Kit really has been a long time coming for a lot of people that may be listening in on this. It has really been many organizations and individuals that have given us and shared their wisdom and insight as we've gone along the way. And, you know, we are very grateful for that. This was part of the vision, this was very important. We recognize the importance of doing this collaboratively and listening and learning and creating together. So I do want to thank people for that. And I also would like to thank the people that have, you know, believed in the work we've been doing here. It takes a lot to, you know, have that trust. You know, it really does take a lot to learn to trust organizations. I can understand that. So thank you to those that, you know, have given that trust to us and that have seen the vision and where we want to go and come alongside with us to bring this to fruition. So the kit is now 100% done, and it's just hard for me to even imagine, but we will be handing the first bunch of these kits over to the Matau Education and Care Center within the next week or so. Been in discussions with them just to finalize the details for that. So yeah, we're really hopeful that this toolkit is going to be informative and a useful tool, that'll influence some real meaningful change for Indigenous youth that come into our city, by giving them information, but also by listening to the role models, and in there share their wisdom of how the challenges they had and how they overcame. So yeah, that is one of the strategies under TIPS programming, the TIPS kit portable injury prevention programming. Another thing that we've been doing actually indirectly, but it now sort of has a more formal way to be identified, is TIPS orientation. So TIPS orientation is something that I believe is really important for the students that are coming to our city to do once they're in the community. And this strategy, it also responds directly to recommendation 88.1-4 in that that we're putting more focus on the students that come out to our city beginning of the year, the middle of the year, the end of the year, actually whenever is best for the high schools. The contexts within the high schools have been very good at, you know, sharing with us what works best for them. And we certainly like to be flexible and work within those parameters the best we can. However, we have come up with these things that you see on the slide. We do offer it at the beginning of the school year. It does get the students to familiar with the hospital, particularly the emergency department. It allows us to provide information about hospital resources, which is a really important thing to do, and to help with this, you know, beginning conversations to help them understand some processes that they will have to navigate through. We offered actually this student orientation is offered in several different ways. The ideal way, of course, is in the hospital. It's the most effective way, and I'll explain why shortly. But we have gone into the schools as well, and gone in myself and hopefully like the Indigenous navigator, spiritual care, sometimes has come with us. I think it's really important to see our faces and make that connection, that personal connection. That's a big part of, I think, success with this type of programming as well. So the objectives during it, of course, they're shown here on the slide. Information sharing, again, just much like the toolkit, we share information here as well. It just, the information we're sharing might be a little bit different, but it's relevant none the same. And an important thing to do with students that have been relocated to our city. Keeping the messaging positive is really important. We understand that students may or may not have ever been in a hospital, let alone ours, and might not have had the best experience, potentially could not have. So I think it's really important to create a positive space where we can have discussions about safe topics and still be able to provide information during those times. So we really put a positive tone onto our messaging. We have, in fact, tried to be as culturally relevant as we could, and we've got a long way to go. We're learning as we go. We do know having elders attend the programming with youth is great, and we encourage it. In fact, we welcome it for ourselves. And we also will offer other things like opening and closing in prayer if that's requested. We certainly, the elders, if they would like to do that, we do have resources here that can assist that to happen as well. And again, we try to work the agenda for the day along with what the teachers want. So yeah, so we're a little bit more flexible here. And again, this type of programming under the TIP strategy, it's focusing on relationship building, a huge thing that, we need to build relationships with the students. I'm thinking that the more positive interactions they have with us, the more they're around us, the better. I think that it's going to make them more inclined to access the hospital if they're in a situation where they need to. So that's the thoughts behind that. So yeah, so relationship building and empowering students as well by giving them information. Again, they're being empowered. That the information is important, and they will tap into that information, hopefully at the time that they need to, and come to the hospital and be able to use that to help them. So some of the information we share with the students is shown here about our hospital resources. They're all listed on here. I think they are. Am I ahead of myself here? Okay, sorry. We talk about, hang on.
Next slide.
Sorry, give me 1 minute here. Am I going forward?
Yeah, there you go.
This one?
Yeah.
There we go. Sorry, I got lost in there. So during their time in, we talk about the Indigenous patient navigators, the mental health assessment team, our spiritual care department, which again, we have Michael Robinson in our spiritual care department, and he has just got the sunniest disposition. Michael is usually available. Most of the time he's available to come in, meet with the youth, and I'll talk a little bit more about him shortly here. And yeah, so giving them the knowledge of all of these things, language interpretation and such, is really, really a helpful thing for the students. So we do this during their TIPS hospital orientation. And there's Michael Robinson himself. If you have never met Michael, he's awesome. We're so fortunate to have him here. He is able to be contacted through the staff in the Emerge. I think they have ways to page Michael. He just meets you right where you're at. You doesn't matter if you're Christian, traditional, or other. He has every ability to help you with your spiritual needs, and if that is your need, in fact, when you're here. So we consider him a great resource, and he certainly has been here for and been accessed by youth that have come to the hospital. He does smudging, he does hand drumming, pipe ceremonies. I think he, before COVID anyway, was talking about exploring sacred fires. Of course, COVID has greatly affected a lot of stuff, so we'll see where that has him now. Anyway, prior to the pandemic anyway, he was 7 days a week. There's on call through the night, maybe a little bit tricky, but again, he would make himself available as a resource. And here's a picture of some beautiful ladies. These are some of our Indigenous navigators. Now, I may have the language wrong here because I know that, again, from the last 2 years, they're changing the language and even some of the job descriptions for the navigator role. And my director may speak more on this coming up. But needless to say, I know one of these ladies at least is not here working at the regional any longer, and that's unfortunate, but I kept her in there anyway because she's so beautiful. And anyway, the Indigenous navigator role is, it's an obviously extremely important role for our hospital. And the emergency department is no exception. I really, during student orientation, I make it a point to have the Indigenous navigator from the Emerge department come and meet the youth, bring the youth to the Indigenous navigator. She actually will hand out cards to them, and they've been found in students' wallets and stuff at times. So I know that it's really, really important to share the information about who they are and that they're there. And that when they're in the emergency department, that it's like having somebody advocate through your experience. So I encourage the youth to ask for the Indigenous navigator right at the triage if they're feeling like they, that they need somebody to advocate. They certainly are available to them. The staff can get them for the student. There's such a welcoming face. It might be very daunting, extremely daunting coming to a hospital, and to have a face and somebody that will speak for you. That's a big thing. So yeah, so that's our Indigenous navigators. And during our TIPS student orientation, I think it's important to share information about what to expect when you come into the hospital accessing the emergency department. For sure is picture identification. Having that with you is helpful. Your health card, having a list of your medications with you. And to limit your valuables. Sometimes people have things on them, whether it's money, it doesn't matter what it is. It's really hard to keep track of things that are when you're in the department, because you could be moved for a test or at any time, and then something get lost. So that's really unfortunate. And I'm not sure what the rules are right now with COVID as far as who you can have with you for support. Of course, that's changing all the time, just like a lot of things with COVID. 19 pressures on the organization. So, but in ideally, we can have one care partner for support. So let me see here. Yeah, list of your known allergies. This is sort of a self-explanatory slide for you. And knowing what to expect, as I mentioned earlier, when you come in, I do go through that a little bit. And this is a busy slide, and it kind of goes, step by step by step through what's going to happen. But, to you or I, that might seem like, quite logical and not, like to be expected. But to somebody who's maybe never been to the emergency or is frightened to come to the emergency, sometimes just having this knowledge and going through it in a safe ahead of time might relieve their anxiety, might be helpful, and encourage them to, when they come, to not be so scared about what is going on, checking in and registering. And then there's, questions that are asked and vital signs are taken. And, they want to know if you're from high school, and they want to know, they'll do this privately as well. Like, these are all things that we are trying to do to improve that process of accessing the hospital. Now, there is a welcome to the emergency department handout that's been created a few years back prior to COVID. I know this was created mainly out of the emergency department. I did see a little bit of the work of this as it went along. The intent of this, again, to provide information and share information. So this form is available at the high schools. I know that they should have it, and if they don't, please do reach out to me and or Lisa, or even the emergency department themselves, because we have this and can send it out. I would encourage teachers and high schools to have this maybe in a place where kids can see this information. They might be afraid to come up and ask for it, and to share the information with them that it's there. I do, during TIPS orientation, let them know that it's there, and do have it in my classroom and hand it out as well to reinforce and help, help the students know that they can take a look at this. It does provide an awful lot of information for them. And a big part, of course, of accessing our hospital is not just how do you come in, it's how do you go out. And we do know, all of us here, that there has been challenges about that process. Again, my director will speak more on that. From an injury prevention lens, the most that I've been able to do is keep myself up to date on what they are actually doing in the emergency department. So I'm sharing accurate information with the youth, and I'm encouraging the youth to remember these things and to take accountability and make the right decisions for themselves. And just having knowledge, I think, of how things should happen so they don't fall through a crack. So this is how, from an injury prevention lens, that I can improve the continuity of care from my perspective, at least. So we do talk about this. We talk about, is there a prescription or specific instructions? Is there any follow-up appointments? And how are you getting home? Of course, being one of the biggest things, because for their safety, that's a really important thing that needs to be discussed. Again, their healthcare provider could address these questions, or even the Indigenous navigator. Somebody needs to have this discussion with the youth before they're going. And of course, this is one of the key things that we've been, the emergency department and our organization is putting an emphasis on, so that we can improve any kind of gaps that would be in this process. So during student orientation, we of course go through it. Here's a slide that depicts how things are right now. As far as I know, hopefully there's no changes at this moment, but there is, of course, the students have access to vans to go home, and they can get a bus pass. It's really important to remember with the buses when they run and when they stop running, because of course the buses only run to a certain time, and then the bus would have to connect. So I think it's important to have that conversation with students that are leaving, if they are taking a city bus. And in fact, even just knowing where are the bus stops here on your property. And so again, we have in fact during orientation discussed that, and even walked out to where the bus stop is on one occasion. So yeah, important information. Taxi slips for youth under 22 years of age. They can get a taxi slip from their nurse that can be arranged. And the safe line is there to be called. I myself had to educate myself a little around the safe line while I was making this presentation, because again, not being frontline, I don't have to call the safe line. I'm more in program development now, but apparently this is a number that can be called by youth themselves, but it also can be called by the staff to help organize and coordinate details around sending youth home from the emergency department. So again, I think it's important that we remember that there are these things there, and that we encourage the staff to tap into these things as well as the youth. And again, from an injury prevention lens, that's what I try to do, have conversations and encourage that to share that knowledge. Knowledge is great unless you don't share it, right? So anyway, here's another sheet that I just found out about during this making of this presentation. So this has been created from some subgroups and some hardworking people, and I think it's a great thing. It shows the current contact people for Mattel Education Care, for CoB and NEC. So there is people that can be contacted. I believe this is there for the nurses to be able to reach out to contacts at each one of these places when they need to coordinate care for the youth that have accessed the emerge. And I think at this point, that's the end of my part of the presentation. I'm going to just slide my chair back and hand over to Lisa. So thank you. And I'll hand it right over to my rep.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lisa Beck, and every time I see Shauna's presentation, I'm just in awe of all the hard work and all the efforts that are put forth in preparing youth for coming to the hospital, and specifically the emergency department. It is certainly a very scary environment, and what we want to do is prepare youth for coming, and also prepare youth to going and to be discharged home. And it gets quite complicated, and it's difficult that we want to be able to give a lot of information to people that really care, but on the other hand, we really are needing to protect personal health information. And I think it is important for those that they are aware that if somebody calls into the emergency department and says, is such and such in your department, all we have the ability to do is confirm that there is somebody with that name registered. We're not obligated to give out information, and it's really important that youth are aware that we are also there to protect their confidentiality as well. So youth consent is required in order for us to reach out, call the various parents, guardians, educational facilities we really want to get the consent. And if the youth are unable to consent, then we have ways of reaching out and having that contact information. But if a youth has capacity, and again, we're not going through a legal or a psychological evaluation, but capacity from a basic perspective means that if they can appreciate the consequences of not calling their guardian, and they understand the risks and the benefits of withholding that information, we do need to respect their privacy and their wishes. When youth arrive with or without a guardian, and we do want to reach out and call the educational facility or call their guardian, what the nurses really takes a lot of time explaining what the benefits are. And it's really important that we reach out early to leverage all of the supports that are in the community for the youth, to be supportive while they're in the emerge, to arrange transportation, services, etc. So the nurse does a very good job of explaining those things. But at the end of the day, if the youth say, no, I do not want you to call, then we have to respect that. It is important that we do have accurate contact information. Shauna has shared with you the list of contacts that we keep at hand, keep with our emergency department charge nurses, so that when we are able to reach out, that information is there. We use the NAN's student safety dispatch line for supports and resources. And when we go through a process of trying to sort out, do they have capacity to consent? Who do we need to call, particularly if they're by themselves or without a guardian? Child Protective Services is something that is a last option. There's a lot of options that the nurse will work through. What's important about discharge and discharge considerations, if they are with or without a guardian, is the things that are considered are, is there a place for this individual to go? Where are they, what is their housing situation? We do have a clothing cupboard that many of us donate to, and that clothing cupboard is accessible through the emergency department, and we will outfit youth with footwear, clothing. Well, we'll outfit anybody that do not have footwear or clothing to whatever is available in our clothing cupboard. And we also consider what kind of supervision. And it may not be an adult, but it may be a responsible person that they're being discharged with to be there as they are recovering, or as they're being discharged with somebody with them for support. What helps the nurses work through all of those processes is a discharge form. Particularly, you can see an example of the discharge form with for youth without a parent or guardian, and it really takes the nurse through various processes. Will they give consent? Who are you giving consent for us to contact? And really helping that nurse make sure they've covered all the options, make sure within this form we've got contact information listed, safety considerations, and everything that we can do to facilitate that safe discharge. And that's the form the nurses use. The one thing that we are trying to do is really work around getting consent in advance. And we've been working, and I need to thank Amanda Manella and a working group that's really been working together to not only help us provide guidance and feedback on that discharge form and the discharge process, but also what we're working towards is a student consent pilot. And what we're proposing, and we've got draft copies of a consent and a memorandum of understanding, or an MOU. These have been drafted and are being reviewed. And what this will look like is we will be providing a consent and an MOU to each of the educational facilities that are interested in participating. And when the students are enrolling, what would be listed as a primary contact is the number for that educational facility. If that consent is provided, and again, it would be purely voluntary for the youth to say yes upon entry into the emergency department, I would want, Matawa as an example, as my primary contact. That consent form, once completed and signed by the youth and signed by the facility, would be provided to the hospital, specifically in our health records department. And that primary contact information would pop up in our medical record to indicate this is the contact information for this particular individual attending school in Thunder Bay. And what that will do is that upon registration, in addition to the various forms that are printed, the face sheet or the sheet that the nurse uses for charting would automatically list that information, and it would provide the ability to dialogue with the youth saying, we are aware you are a student at Matawa, as an example. We have this information. It's really important that we'd like to be able to phone. Can we go ahead and phone? And it really helps the nurse leverage that information and make them aware that we know that there is support and help for them, and we would like to be able to contact them. The consent, again, providing consent is really important, and really reiterating to youth why it is important that we do reach out. And again, you can appreciate that some youth are very nervous about providing information. There are many cases where youth do not want to give their name, and it's difficult to piece together who are you, where are you from, and who do we need to call. And sometimes as the patient is in the emergency department over time, some of this information is quite forthcoming once that relationship is put together, is established between the patient and the nurse or the Indigenous patient navigator, so that slowly this information is being able to be divulged and given to us so that we can reach out. I wanted to reiterate that if somebody arrived in the emergency department and there was a medical emergency, if medical treatment was required, we do have the ability to do what is required without consent. So no one would go without medical treatment if it was an emergency. So with the consent pilot, we're hoping that we can get our consent and the MOUs for the facilities and the hospital put together. And we hope to actually trial this in the next student intake. So that would be something we're working towards in the very near future. Part of what's important, and we recognize that even though we have mandatory education and training for staff upon hire to the hospital, particularly around Indigenous health, we do offer this as a mandatory e-learning, and it's completed with 1 year of within 1 year of hire. And there's also mandatory education that's provided for everybody upon orientation. It's again provides an overview, talks about colonialism, stereotypes, and it really does address some misconceptions about cultural and historical content, and all staff do participate in that. Both Shaunath and myself have attended the safety training course, the SANYAS, Indigenous primary health care, through the various forums, and again, an 8-week online module that's provided. And as of 2017, since it's been offered through the hospital, we have well over 300 healthcare workers and board members that have completed the course. And again, that's a number that we looked at a few months ago. And each day more people graduate and become trained with that course, which is amazing. The other thing that has been of interest is our medical advisory committee. Our physicians are committed and have this course available as well. So there is training that is available, and there's always more training that we could do, but this is some of the training that we do have in the hospital. Shaunath has mentioned the ED Indigenous Patient Navigator. At this point, we do have a vacancy. So Leona has left the organization, and we do have a vacancy that we've been trying to recruit. When we had the vacancy, we used this opportunity to look at what things could we enhance and could we update the job description to be able to provide. And what we did was we looked at various organizations' job descriptions, and including the role of a behavioral service worker, somebody who's skilled in managing behaviors and really understanding and having experience working with mental health and addictions. So what we've done is actually updated the job description, and that's been posted, and we've interviewed for that position. So we're hoping very soon to have that position filled. We do have access to 24/7 phone translational services. And Shaunith again has identified the various interprofessional team members within the organization, not just nurses and physicians, but social workers, spiritual care. If somebody required admission to the pediatric unit or the child and youth mental health unit, they have access to child life specialists. We reach out to them occasionally in the Emerge for their consultation and specialty. And we also have Delico on-site staff, again, more focused on the inpatient pediatric area to assist and with care. The other thing that we've done, recognizing that when you're presenting, and I'm sure everybody at some point has presented to the emergency department, when you are providing your very private information, we recognize it's a fairly wide open space, particularly with COVID now with barriers. You have to speak very loudly, and often people do not want to have to say in front of everybody why they're here and what are some of their issues. So what we've done is we've reorganized some of those spaces, and instead of having the triage up at the main desk, the triage workstations are now around the corner, and there's 2 in that space. And sometimes we'll have a 3rd one going. And those 3 private workstations or triage spaces provide much more confidentiality so that youth can provide more detailed, more confidential information with confidence that not everybody's hearing what they're here for. We've got new tools and protocols that help manage escalating behaviors. We leverage physician collaboration, and before discharging patients, or sometimes we have to convince people to stay until they can see a physician. We really rely on the physician collaboration to be able to give an assessment before discharge or before someone leaves without being medically assessed. We're working on workplace violence prevention policy update, and we're focusing on not only just making the algorithm and tools more, I would say, comprehensive. We're also doing more training with de-escalation. So trying to prevent the escalation, understanding risks of triggering someone, not just for staff, but also for our security personnel as well. So that's up and coming and is currently in place. What's in the works? We recognize that the ED Indigenous Patient Navigator, we have a gap right now. We have funding, and we have a budget to support just a Monday to Friday Indigenous Patient Navigator. And we will be seeking a collaborative partnership for a submission through the Choose Life application in hopes that we could actually have expanded coverage. May it be 16 hours of coverage with some on-call, or 24 hours of access. We know the importance of the role. We know that it's a really friendly face with a lot of benefits for supporting individuals while they're in the emergency department. We're also actually, I met Dr. Janet Smiley yesterday and have been working with her in looking at some of our protocols and policies, particularly around the standard of care, emergency protocols, mental health and addictions care, to be able to look at it from a medically informed Indigenous perspective. And Dr. Janet Smiley, along with Crystal Puri and myself and a team, will be looking at some of those protocols and updating those with that perspective. I guess really thank you again for allowing us to share with what we're doing, not only in injury prevention, but in the emergency department. And our contact information is there. If there is more information that you would like from either Shauneth or Joe, who is the other injury prevention lead and sitting right behind me while we're doing this presentation, their contact information is there. Myself, Lisa, and Deborah Pratt as well, the emergency department manager, is always available for questions, and her email is listed there. So with that being said, we can open it up for questions and we can stop sharing the presentation anytime. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. Tons of information, guys. Thank you so much. I do have some questions. We got about 7 minutes left. So we've got like 4 questions I'm going to run past you. First off, now the city's actually presenting next, so this might be a little confusing, but could the TIPS kit be combined with the city's welcome kit for Northern Remote students that is being developed through the Indigenous Relations Office? So I'm not sure if you're able, I'm not sure how familiar you would be with this welcome kit, but.
So I guess to answer that, it's a self-contained kit. It's been patented and trademarked, so it's on its own. I certainly would I wouldn't discourage if they were reaching out to communities and about to bring theirs in. I would welcome them sharing that process with us and vice versa. Certainly, it makes a lot of sense to try to do that. But to put any of their things in the kit would be difficult simply because it's been trademarked and copyrighted.
Okay, I can see definitely the two going together. Yeah,
Mhm.
awesome. A really good question here. You were talking about the step by step, and I'm going to assume that was the steps if you go into a merge. The question is there a visual map to go with that list? Because that might be
So
awesome to see.
I guess I can answer that because I spoke to it. I don't believe there is any visual map at this point that's been created. This is why these kind of forums are so, such a good time to have these discussions. If you felt or were hearing that this is something that would be helpful for the youth, then perfect. Let's make that. Let's try to make that happen. Would be so. Thank you for bringing that up. There is not one, but it's not something that cannot be done.
Yeah. And I know for someone who's totally new to the environment, that might be something that's really keeps the anxiety down, right? So.
And just to mention, what we are doing is we're actually reorganizing the emergency department waiting room, and that should come forward with new chairs. And what we're going to do is put new signage, and that will be step 1, present here, step 2, present at this.
Nice.
And I think that's going to make it easier to navigate within that triage and waiting room area.
Yeah. The other thing I know always seems to come up is I know emerge is it's not first come, first serve. Let's put it that way. It depends on how serious it is. And if someone that isn't explained to them, then a whole lot of misinformation gets generated. So here's a question. I think I know the answer, but I'm going to put it out anyways. When the students come to the city for the first time, do they have access to having a physical done to determine what medical needs they may have, such as dental, vision, health issues? Are they lined up with a possible family doctor or medical service providers that have FNIB clients, so coverage through health services or First Nations Health Branch?
I can only say from my understanding, I think that that's something that's organized outside of Thunder Bay Regional it's not within our framework of or
Yeah.
responsibility. I think it possibly starts in the community. It should start in the community if it doesn't, because that's where you can identify where there is going to be or there already is issues. Yeah, it's not something that we work on
Yeah.
with our organization.
Okay, and that might be more Matawa or DFC even, so.
Yes.
But now maybe, let's see if you can remember this. What specifically were the 7 recommendations that came out of the inquest? The recommendations for Thunder Bay Regional?
Oh boy, this is a test. I love it.
Yeah.
I may not get them perfect, but recommendation 1 was to have students, I believe 88-1 was to have the students from DFC, and at the time it was, I don't know if it was called NNEC, but Matau Education Center come to the hospital twice a year, I believe was it. It was to include the students from grades 9 to 12. It was to provide an orientation. It was to create specific programming, was to include elders. No, that's 1, 2, 3. I'm going very quickly through my hands. And it was that if we're going to work specifically on or to include families specifically, like a family specific thing in programming, that we would have consent from them, I believe.
Way to go, you. I knew you'd be able to do it, but.
I don't know if I did them exactly right, but I'm pretty sure
Okay.
in order there.
Well, here's an important question. Well, they're all important, but are the security contractors for the Thunder Bay Regional subject to cultural safety training? And if not, could they be?
Good question. So the security guards are we contract, they're an outside organization. With that being said, yes, they do have access and they do have cultural training opportunities available through the hospital.
Okay. Do we know if they take it? Like, is it
Yes,
mandatory
they
for them
do.
to take it?
I don't believe it's mandatory, again, because we can't enforce as we're not their employers, but we do offer it and it's highly recommended. So I don't know how many of the security guards have actually completed, but it's certainly available to them.
Okay. Interesting. Will the hospital accept consent forms developed from organizations? Or does it have to come from you, is the question.
The consent form is very specific and it's in, I guess, it needs to include certain components of the consent and how much information is within the consent. So it's specific related to the consent of releasing personal health information and how that information will be used. It's not like consent for surgery or overarching consent for every time they come to a hospital. It's very specific and what that information, what the consent and what that information release looks like.
Is this also available, all of this amazing support, for Indigenous post-secondary students? So not just high school.
I am very open always to and relying on the insight from the people I work with. And Sandy, you would know. So whatever the organization is that reaches out to me, I trust them and expect them that what they're asking of me is to share information, and they know what that information usually is because I'm very transparent. Is this group of students mature enough? Is this something that they need? Can you support them when they receive this information? Because I can't do that from afar. I can give information. All these things, if those stops are in place, I think this information can be shared in many different organizations to many just different levels, like, to be honest with you.
Okay, excellent. I agree.
Yes,
I totally agree.
The answer is yes, it's available to whoever feels they need it.
Yeah, excellent. We're over time, but one last question. So just knock it out of the park. What does TIP stand for one more time? And what is the contents in the kit?
Okay, so TIPS stands for Thunder Bay Regional Indigenous Injury Prevention Strategies. And again, created to set apart the work we're doing here. And sorry, recap the second question of that part.
What's inside? What's the kit?
Inside, one of the strategies being the kit, and inside the kit, there's 4 sessions. One session is on impairment, which deals specifically with how you are when you're impaired. You do tasks while you're doing like a couple of different games wearing impaired goggles. And then you have a key takeaway reflection time where you talk about, okay, so you feel like this, so it's probably not a good idea to do A, B, C, or D, encouraging the youth to use their critical thinking skills. Second session, opioids and naloxone. It talks about signs and symptoms of opioid overdoses, really reinforce key things there where the kids not to be afraid to use naloxone. If somebody's having a heart attack and it's not drug overdose, you're not going to hurt them by giving them naloxone, so please give it. Just simple stuff, but really important information. During that same second session, we do recovery position, which is something that, you know, all of us can probably, hopefully, have related to at some point in our lives. If somebody has too much to drink or something, putting them in the recovery position, the importance of knowing that can save someone's life. So it's basically that kind of thing, and going through and interacting with the youth and sharing that information. Third session in there is the 2 role models, one young man and one young woman, both of which come out from First Nations communities to our city, their experiences, some of the challenges, some of the ways they overcame those, and again, a very positive, very, very positive tone used when it's, and then the last one, and sorry, in that role model one, or this whole thing, there's a little video there's some kind of a room that was created on this for this continuity of care. There's a little promotional video you can scoot to if you wanted to see that. Anyway, the last session in there, the 4th session, is called The Great Debate. It's an opportunity to revisit all 3 of those sessions in a safe question and answer period in order to really reinforce the key takeaways from them in a safe way and encourage critical thinking skills while building relationship and trust.
Yeah. Amazing job, you. I've seen this in action. It's absolutely phenomenal. It is the youth tend to really get into it. So highly recommend checking it out for anyone watching this presentation. Lisa, Shauna, thank you so much. That was amazing. Thank you for all the work you're doing. To our participants, we're about to go into a break again. We got to wait for our play to win code here. There it is. Write this down. You need all of the codes to win. Remember, you're going to enter it in the play to win tab during the breaks. We're coming back at 3:45, so that's only in 10 minutes. And this time we're going to hear from the City of Thunder Bay Indigenous Relations Office. So get some water, move around a little bit, and I'll see you at 3:45.